secure that and mean that the other candidates then stand a chance?
No, I think really if he carries on the way that he started this today and shows that he has got the strength and the courage to go on, I think he will win, and I'm convinced he will win.
Yes. Thank you all very much indeed. Back to you, Jeremy.
With me now down at Westminster are the two political commentators, Boris Johnston of The Telegraph and Simon Jenkins of The Times. First of all, do you reckon he'll survive, Simon Jenkins?
I think he will just, but I think this is the most extraordinary thing to do. I mean, we're told that this was inevitable. There's no other way he could cope with this crisis. That sounds to me like June panic. I still am very sceptical as to whether it was a good idea, and it seems to me that the most likely outcome is going to be a wounded John Major, which is where we started.
Well, that's the worst of all possible worlds for him, isn't it?
Well, it would be. I mean, if there was no alternative, there was no alternative. But if he comes out of this with a bruising contest from which he emerges not with his leadership strengthened, but with his leadership weakened, I'm not at all sure it wouldn't have been better to have sweated out the summer.
Boris Johnson, do you think he'll emerge wounded or triumphant or what?
I think I agree with Simon. I think on balance he'll just about scrape through. I think actually, I don't think it, I think it was the right thing to do, more or less, to call a snap leadership election. After all, this is the first surprising thing that I can think of that John Major's done for about 3 or 4 years.
That doesn't make it ipso facto a good thing.
Well, at least it's the first time I can remember since he got an opt-out from the social chapter at Maastricht. He's done something that's slightly confounded his enemies. And I think it might be tactically sound also in the sense that he's got the Scott report coming out later on this year, and that stood to do him some damage. I think he's been thoroughly wise to go for it now.
Do you think the presentation of this as a healing process is accurate, or is it wide of the mark?
And one of the people earlier in the programme said that at a time like this, MPs are worried about their seats. When the leader is the leader, there's not a lot they can do about it. I mean, they've just got to sort of sit grim, tight, and fight. They're now offered a chance. They're offered their one chance of, as Theresa Gorman said, of an alternative. They're allowed to think the unthinkable. And while tonight, with 4 hours or 5 hours under our belts, it all looks fairly easy for John Major, a weekend of opinion polls, a lot of campaigning, clearly a stalking horse candidate is going to emerge. I think this is a very dangerous thing to do.
Well, I mean, if you're a backbench Tory MP, you've got to think very carefully about what outcome you want from this thing. If you vote against or abstain from supporting John Major, then you do indeed, as Simon says, run the risk of damaging him. On the other hand, you might not damage him sufficiently to prompt him to step down, in which case he would, as Simon says, battle on as a weakened and enfeebled John Major. Now, is that what you want as a backbench Tory MP? That calculation in mind, you might be inclined either to vote for, basically to vote for John Major.
What would you guess would be the proportion of MPs either voting against or abstaining, which would be fatally wounding to the Prime Minister?
Well, it would be disastrous to go to a second ballot, just to take one incidence of the catastrophe scenario. I have an awful feeling if they went to a second ballot, a lot of cabinet ministers would clearly say, now is my one chance. The thing that I think Major's got to try and find a way of doing over the next 10 days is getting over the heads of these panic-stricken MPs to the party in the country, which is much more pro-Major than the MPs appear to be. He's got to try and persuade the party that there's no alternative to him, and he's going to find that very difficult, I think.
Very quickly, Boris Johnson.
No, I think John Major's going to be able to capitalise on the simple fact that when MPs think about the alternatives, they'll have on the one hand the Europhiles, on the other hand the Eurosceptics. And far from undermining his position as Prime Minister, I think the split in the party is going to consolidate his position as Prime Minister, and I think he'll survive.
Well, that's all from Westminster. Back to you, Peter.
Well, Jeremy, a look at the papers, and they're full of some interesting stuff. In fact, there's actually a news story in the Times in the sense that it's an article by Norman Lamont. The Times' headline, Major challenges his critics to fight, and one of them, who hasn't decided yet whether to fight or not, Norman Lamont, hasn't said so anyway, writes an article in the Times saying this is where Major must put up or shut up. Norman Lamont says that indecision over Europe lies behind the Prime Minister's trouble. Apparently, Mr. Lamont wrote this article before he knew that Mr. Major was resigning as Tory leader. The Daily Telegraph has Major throwing down the gauntlet, Major's ultimate gamble. The Guardian, time to put up or shut up. The Independent. The Herald Tribune, too, has it as the major lead in the newspaper there. Major's great gamble. The Daily Mail, so who says he's wet now? The Daily Express, put up or shut up, says Major. Put up or shut up today, and also the same in The Sun. And so to a reminder of the main news again, John Major has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party. He'll stand in a leadership contest. Until then, he remains Prime Minister. In an emotional statement in the Downing Street garden, he told members of his party it was time to put up or shut up. And on this programme, the Conservative MP for the Isle of Wight, Barry Field, confirmed that he has been approached to stand as a stalking horse candidate against John Major. And the Home Secretary, Michael Howard, has said he fully supports the Prime Minister. But the former whipless Rebel MP Tony Marlow has told us that John Major is a nice guy but is a loser.
I've been deeply involved in politics since I was 16. I see public service as a duty, and if you can serve, I believe you have an obligation to do so. I've now been Prime Minister for nearly 5 years. In that time, we've achieved a great deal, but for the last 3 years, I've been opposed by a small minority in our party. I am not prepared to see the party I care for laid out on the rack like this for any longer. The Conservative Party must make its choice. Every leader is leader only with the support of his party. That is true of me as well. That is why I'm no longer prepared to tolerate the present situation. In short, it is time to put up or shut up.
Tomorrow morning, Andrew